We're going to go ahead and proceed in the matter of Street v. Taylor. Are the parties here and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do we have any housekeeping matters or pretrial that we need to take up before we start with opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor. Rebecca Garcia on behalf of the plaintiff in this case. That would be Mrs. Street on behalf of the estate of her daughter, Rory Street. And at this time, I would also like to take a moment to introduce my co-counsel, who is Evan Jones. She will be my second chair in handling all of the technology for us today. Your Honor, at this time, I would just like to ask if we may assume that all witnesses are constructively sworn.
You may.
And for the purposes of this trial, because it is a Zoom trial, may we make objections sitting down just to make it easier to unmute and mute the microphone?
You may.
And at this time, I would also like to offer one stipulation that we have. We have agreed with opposing counsel that there will be no mention of any note or any admission of any note that was found by trainer Merriweather in her classroom approximately a week before this incident occurred.
So are you asking that that exhibit be excluded or just saying that y'all have agreed?
We have stipulated that it will not be admitted.
That's
and
my
I have nothing
understanding as
further,
well,
Your
Your
Honor.
Honor.
Sorry? Y'all cut out for just a second when you were both speaking. Ms. Dworkin,
I just said that was my understanding of our meeting before trial as well, that the note is to be excluded.
Very well, then we will exclude exhibit. Is it 12?
I believe it's exhibit 12.
Yes, that's correct.
And both parties are in agreement. Okay.
And I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any housekeeping matters or pretrial matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, may we state our appearances?
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I, along with my co-counsel, Mr. Brendan Flynn.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
We represent the defense in today's case, Ms. Reese Taylor. We also have a few housekeeping matters to get to before we proceed with our motions in limine at this time.
Chrissy?
We would just ask, as this is our first time in a Zoom trial, we would just ask your preferences for movement. Maybe feel free to get up and walk around so long as we stay within the webcam view.
So long as you're in the webcam, that's fine.
Yes, Your Honor. And at this time, I would also like to ask your preferences for publishing exhibits. Is it okay if our co-chairs do this via a screen share function so that it will pop up on the screen?
Yes, that'll be fine.
And also, we believe that both parties may be calling witnesses by deposition today. Is it okay if we have our co-counsels read those lines from the deposition at that time?
For depositions, that's how I'd like you to do it. If you do anything with the pre-admitted exhibits, you'll need to do those yourself. So the expert reports, you'll read into the record yourself.
Yes, Your Honor, and that actually brings me to my next point, is that there are certain exhibits that are pre-admitted, and I just wanted to flag those for the court. That's exhibits 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we've also stipulated that exhibits 14, 15, and 22 are stipulated to as authentic.
Yes.
And that's all we had for housekeeping, Your Honor, and we're ready to proceed with motions in limine.
Very well, go ahead.
Would Ms. Garcia like to go first?
The plaintiff has no motions in limine, Your Honor.
Very well, we'll proceed with the defense motions in limine.
Yes, Your Honor. I did have the chance to speak with Ms. Garcia before trial, and we have agreed to exclude any mention of any precautionary measures that Ms. Taylor may have implemented after the death of Rory Street, as that is a violation of Federal Rule of Evidence 407. I believe that Ms. Garcia is okay with this as well.
Ms. Garcia?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Very well.
Your Honor, at this time, I would also like to note that this trial is bifurcated. At this stage, we are only determining liability, so I would just ask to exclude any mention of damages today.
Ms. Garcia?
That is in agreement, Your Honor.
Very well.
And Your Honor, at this time, I would also like to move to admit exhibits 14 and 15 into evidence, the authenticity of which has been stipulated to.
Ms. Garcia, do you have any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Very well, exhibits 14 and 15 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. At that time, we're ready to proceed.
All right, we will move on to opening statements. Just as a matter of housekeeping from the court, I will be keeping your time and I will give you a time check at the end of plaintiff's case in chief. And I will give you a time check at the end of defense case in chief as well before closing arguments. We're going to try to be as efficient as possible with our time. So you can take a short break while I'm doing the math for the time. But other than that, we're going to roll on through as quickly as possible. Very well. Opening statements, Ms. Garcia, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Burma Road. 2 words that can strike fear into any high school soccer player in Waco, Texas. Now today you're going to hear that Burma Road was like a tradition in Waco, a disciplinary coaching tactic that was passed on from generation to generation of soccer players. And you'll hear that all of that changed on September 7th, 2018, when the defendant, Reese Taylor, tragically pushed high school senior Rory Street to her breaking point. Now, Rory Street had her whole life in front of her when it was tragically cut short when she was just 18 years old. Rory attended Waco High School, where she was the star soccer player on the team. She was the best one, and it wasn't even close. Rory had been playing soccer since she was a little kid, and there was absolutely no doubt that she was on her way to play Division I soccer in college. Then, September 7th, 2018, one practice wiped that all away. Today you're going to meet Aubrey Saracen, and she's Rory's lifelong best friend and her teammate. Along with Rory, Aubrey played soccer all 4 years of her high school career. She was with Rory during those last few moments of her life, and she's going to tell you everything that happened that day. It was scorching hot on September 7th, 2018. Over 100 degrees of sweltering Texas heat. The defendant started practice around 3:15, like usual. The team was running a full scrimmage that day. Ms. Saracen remembers that day because the defendant had her running Burma Road. Now, you're going to hear from Ms. Saracen that this was a drill that the defendant used to punish her players. If they weren't performing right, she'd send them right to Burma Road. The player would have to run 30 yards, then dribble a soccer ball another 30 yards, and then shoot on an open goal. After that, they'd have to crawl on their hands and legs all the way back, those 60 yards. And the defendant would have them do this until she felt like they had done enough. Sometimes it felt like forever. So, at this point, the defendant had sent Miss Saracen to Burma Road. It was around 4:30, and she had been running it for maybe 15 minutes. She was about 20 yards away from the rest of the team, and they were still scrimmaging. Then she heard the defendant yell at Rory, at the top of her lungs. She heard the defendant yell at Rory for missing passes and being out of position, and for her sloppy play. This went on until the defendant told Rory, "Go and take your sorry butt to Burma Road. You're useless on this field, so you might as well run until you pass out." And that's exactly what happened. Rory went over and joined Miss Saracen in running Burma Road. But after a few minutes, Rory began struggling. She was unusually pale. She felt funny. She had chest pain. She was given no water breaks while running, and she had no shade to rest under. She was simply running in the scorching Texas heat, every step bringing her closer to passing out. And now you're going to hear from Rory's mother that even she ran this drill back when she was in high school, but not like this. Rory struggled through completing those few laps of Burma Road, and the defendant's response was to change the drill to inflict physical activity on top of that. The defendant had her players line up in a single file line in front of Rory, about 10 yards away from Rory. She then rolled a ball to Rory, and on her whistle, she had one player, one after another, run at Rory and use a slide tackle on her. And each time, Rory fell to the ground. 15 times in total. This was a drill that had never been used on any player in practice before. And you're going to hear that slide tackles can get physical. The player that has the player who's slide tackling can tackle the player with the ball to the ground. Sometimes they can even knock their cleats right into that other player's hips. Despite this, the defendant carried on with the drill. Now you'll hear that just before that first whistle, Rory looked lifeless. She had her hands on her hips, she was breathing heavily, and she was moving slowly. She wasn't given water, and she wasn't given a break. On the defendant's whistle, that first player ran at Rory full speed, slid the ball away, and knocked her down. The defendant then walked over to Rory, and you'll hear that she yanked her up by her jersey, had her do it again. 15 times. On that 15th time, Rory just collapsed. She was shaking. She was laying on the ground under the scorching hot Texas heat. No shade, after not having a break. By the time the ambulance arrived that day, it was too late. Rory had already died right there on the field. Today, you'll receive the expert report of Dr. Regan McConaughey, and his report will tell you that Rory Street died of heat exhaustion or heat stroke and nothing else. That at the time in question, the temperature was about 105 degrees, and all of Rory's symptoms on September 7th, 2018 are consistent with the symptoms of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Now, the plaintiff has the burden of proof in this case, Your Honor. We must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that 1, the defendant had a duty and owed that duty to Rory Street to conduct practice in a safe manner. 2, that the defendant breached that duty and didn't act as a reasonable person would have in those circumstances. And 3, that breach proximately caused Rory Street's death. We expect the defense to try to convince you that Rory Street caused her own death, that she's to blame for this. We expect, and it's true, Your Honor, there was a small amount of cocaine in Rory's system, and we expect the defense to use that. But even the defendant's own expert will admit that that amount of cocaine was nominal. And we'll show you today that that small amount of cocaine had nothing to do with Rory Street's death. We'll show you today that it was the defendant, Mrs. Reese Taylor, who had all the blame for Rory's death because she violated multiple coaching guidelines. She bears full responsibility for this tragedy. And at the end of today's trial, after you've heard all of the evidence, we are confident that you will see that we have met our burden. At the conclusion of the evidence, I will stand before you and I will ask that you return the only verdict that the evidence will support, that Miss Taylor is fully liable for the death of Rory Street. Thank you.
Ms. Dorfman, would you like to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. You can't prevent what you can't predict. When a person dies prematurely, we call that tragedy. It's in our nature that when that happens, we look for meaning. We try to put all the pieces back together to make sense of what happened. Rory Street's death is a tragedy. Ordinarily, that would be the end of the matter. We would grieve, try to celebrate her life, and try to move on. But today, your duty is something much greater. In the court of law, we have to separate fact from emotion. And when you do that, it'll become clear that Coach Taylor could not have possibly predicted what happened to Rory Street that afternoon. You can't prevent what you can't predict. Ms. Garcia just came before you and she talked a lot about Coach Taylor's soccer practices. And specifically, she described a practice that occurred on September 7, 2018. She told you about how hot it was that day, about how Coach Taylor made Rory run Burma Road, about how Rory had to practice some slide tackling drills, and about how Rory Street eventually died. But what she didn't tell you, and what you'll hear today, is that Rory Street was found with drugs in her system when she died. She was found with cocaine in her system. You're going to hear today that the drugs that Rory had in her system at the time of her death they're a risk factor for exertional heat stroke. And that without those risk factors, the probability of dying from heat stroke is less than 5%. Because Rory never let Coach Taylor know how she was feeling, and because Coach Taylor had no idea that Rory had drugs in her system at the time of practice, she couldn't have possibly predicted what happened to Rory. And you can't prevent what you can't predict. And despite this, the plaintiff has brought a wrongful death suit against Coach Taylor, taking on a burden of proof. You see, plaintiff has to prove to you today that Ms. Taylor owed a duty of care to Rory, that Ms. Taylor somehow breached that duty of care, and that breach was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. Now, proximate cause is a loaded term. That means that not only does the plaintiff have to prove that Rory Street's death was somehow foreseeable, but the plaintiff also has to prove that Coach Taylor's actions were more than 50% to blame for what happened to Rory. You see, that's because here in the state of Texas, if Rory is more than 50% responsible for what happened to her that afternoon, you cannot find Coach Taylor liable. It's the plaintiff's burden to meet all of those elements today, and they won't be able to do so. To show you why, you'll hear from some witnesses today, some live on camera and some by deposition from those who can't be here with us. You'll hear that we don't dispute much of what Ms. Garcia has just told you. It was hot that day. Rory did run Burma Road, and she did do slide tackling drills that day. But what you'll hear is that none of this was unusual. You and I both know that here in Waco, Texas, it gets pretty hot. These soccer players that practice throughout the summer, they're no strangers to playing in the heat. You're going to hear that Burma Road is a tradition that stems all the way back to the 1990s, and that Coach Taylor even had to run this drill herself back when she was a soccer star at Waco High. You'll hear that Rory has even run this drill multiple times. No one's ever gotten sick, and certainly no one's ever died after running Burma Road. You're also going to hear a lot about slide tackling. You're going to hear that this is a common maneuver in all soccer games, and that each player should be prepared to handle a slide tackle. You'll hear that they practice them all the time, and that no one's ever gotten sick, and certainly no one's ever died. Perhaps most importantly, Your Honor, you'll hear today all of the things that made it so that Coach Taylor could not have possibly predicted what happened to Rory that afternoon. You'll hear about Rory's demeanor and about the lack of any indication that she wasn't feeling well, that she needed a break, or that she was about to die. You'll hear that Rory was Coach Taylor's star player, a star athlete in peak physical condition, and that she should have been able to weather all of these drills that Coach Taylor threw at her. And you'll hear about why, on that day in particular, she couldn't. It's because of something that Coach Taylor never could have expected. That Rory Street had cocaine in her system, a risk factor for exertional heat stroke. And when you hear this testimony, I urge you to think about Coach Taylor and how she couldn't have possibly prevented the things she couldn't predict. At the end of today's trial, I'll stand where I'm standing now. I'll review all of the evidence that we will hear today, and I'll ask you to find the only verdict that evidence allows. Find Coach Taylor not liable. Thank you.
All right, we're going to proceed with the plaintiff's case. Plaintiff, call your first witness.
At this time, the plaintiff would like to call Miss Aubrey Saracen.
Ms. Saracen?
Present, I think you need to unmute my video. It says that the host has muted your video. There we go.
There we are. All right, plaintiff, you can proceed when you're ready.
Please introduce yourself, spelling your last name for the record.
My name is Aubrey Saracen. My last name is Saracen.
How old are you, Ms. Saracen?
I'm 18.
Where do you go to school?
Waco High School.
What are some of the activities you take part in at Waco High?
Mainly soccer. That's my kind of everyday, all day thing. But also I'm an engineer. I want to go to college for engineering.
How long have you, or do you play soccer? How long have you played soccer at Waco High?
I played all 4 years. But this is my senior year, so this is my last year playing.
Did you know Rory Street?
She was my best friend.
Did you know her in any other way?
She was also my teammate.
How good of a soccer player was Rory?
Rory was the best. Rory would have gone on to play Division I soccer if she hadn't died.
We'll get to that date in a minute, but first I want to ask you a few questions about your coach. Who was your coach at Waco High School?
Reese Taylor.
Was she your coach all 4 years?
Yes.
How would you describe Coach Taylor's coaching style?
She was really hard on us. She always used intimidation kind of as a way to motivate us, I guess, or humiliate us. Not really sure, but she went really hard on us.
What are some of the drills that she would have you guys do during practice?
I mean, she's famous for Burma Road, which is pretty brutal, and it can go on for as long as she wants it to. And then she would also do a slide tackle drill, and we played scrimmages as well.
You mentioned Burma Road. What is Burma Road?
So Burma Road is, I think it's a Coach Taylor invention where she makes us run 30 yards and then dribble a ball for 30 yards. And then we have to score a goal on an open net, and then bear crawl on our hands and feet all the way back to the finish line. So another 60 yards. And then she just makes you run it for as long as she wants until she thinks that you're ready to go back into the game.
Where is Burma Road located?
It's on a patch of the field right next to the practice field.
Now, I want to ask you just a couple more questions here about Coach Taylor. Are you currently a starter on your soccer team?
Yes. No, I'm not. Sorry.
Just to be clear, is that a no, you're not a starter?
No, I'm not.
Why are you not a starter?
I mean, I don't want to point fingers, but I mean, Coach Taylor's daughter is a starter, so I don't really know, but that's just kind of what happened.
And how did it make you feel when that happened?
I mean, I was bummed. I guess I hope it was because I didn't play well enough. But I don't hold a grudge against Coach Taylor or anything. I'm just here for the team.
Okay, now I want to turn your attention back to September 7th, 2018. Do you remember that day of soccer practice?
Mm-hmm.
What time did it start?
It started at about 3:15. We usually do afternoon practices.
And at this time, Ms. Saracen, I want to direct your attention to Exhibit 21. Do you have that in front of you?
I can pull it up.
Your Honor, this exhibit has been pre-admitted into evidence. Permission to publish for convenience?
You may.
I have it pulled up as well.
Okay, if my co-counsel could put it up on the screen. And can we scroll to the next page, please? Okay. Ms. Saracen, you mentioned that practice started at 3:15 p.m. Using this exhibit, can you tell us what time it was at 2:51?
What time it was? I'm sorry, the
I'm
temperature.
sorry, what the temperature was at 2:51?
It was 100 degrees,
And what about at 3:51?
103 degrees.
And was this typical for this time of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we're in Central Texas, so it gets really hot around August.
Okay, we can take that exhibit down now. Thank you. Let's focus more on what actually happened at that practice.
Okay.
What was the team doing that day?
We were playing a scrimmage, so it's just a practice game with two different parts of the team playing against each other.
Were you part of that scrimmage?
I was actually running Burma Road at the time.
Do you remember why you were running Burma Road?
I guess I just wasn't playing well enough that day. I don't know. Coach Taylor just has us run Burma Road when she doesn't think we're adequate.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as Exhibit 2, and I'm directing opposing counsel to it. Ms. Saracen, do you have Exhibit 2 in front of you?
Yes, I do. And
what is this?
It looks like an aerial view of the school and the practice fields. And then there's this little boxes, and there's like a blue box and a red box. The blue box looks like the practice field, and then the red box would be where we would run Burma.
And how do you know that this is what this exhibit is?
I've spent so many hours there, so I would know it when I see it.
Does this fairly and accurately depict the field as it was on September 7th, 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move Exhibit 2 into evidence, striking all previous marks of identification.
Ms. Rookin, any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted to evidence.
And I also move to publish.
You may.
Okay, so Ms. Saracen, you just told us that you were running Burma Road. What do you remember happening after that?
I remember at some point, Coach Taylor started yelling at Reese and made her come run Burma with me.
How long had you been running Burma Road when you heard this yelling?
Probably about 15 minutes.
So using Exhibit 2, can you just describe where you were when you heard the yelling?
Yeah, so I was in the red box somewhere. I mean, it all blurs together when you're running it, but I was probably 20 or so yards away from them when they were on the field.
And where were they exactly?
They were
using this exhibit.
They were in the blue box.
Okay, my second chair can go ahead and take that down now. Thank you. And so were you able to clearly hear what Coach Taylor was telling Rory?
Yeah, I could hear what she was yelling.
What were some of the things she was saying?
I just remember her yelling at her just because she wasn't making goals and she wasn't, running well enough. And then I remember distinctly that she said, go on and take your sorry butt to Burma Road. You're useless on the field, so you might as well run until you pass out.
Okay, so at this point, you and Rory are both on Burma Road.
Mm-hmm.
What happened while you guys were running?
Rory looked really pale, and she didn't usually, but she didn't look like she was feeling very well, but she didn't complain or anything. And I think it's because Coach hates it when we complain. So she didn't want to get a worse drill punishment, but I can tell she was struggling.
Did she say anything about how she felt?
She said her chest hurt.
And did you do anything when you heard some of this and saw some of this?
We kept running. But I wanted to make sure she was okay.
Did you tell anyone about this?
I don't recall.
We'll get to that in a little bit later. But first, I just want to move on for a second. What happened after this point?
After that point, Coach got mad at Rory because for whatever reason, I guess she didn't think that she was running well enough on Burma. So she called her back over to the field and stopped the scrimmage and made everybody line up to do a slide tackle drill.
And what is a slide tackle?
So a slide tackle is when one player is dribbling a ball down the field and then somebody else comes in and basically with their feet tries to knock the player over with like by their feet. So like Rory would be standing here and then the tackler would come in and like swoop and knock her down while she was dribbling the ball.
How far was the tackler from where Rory was when this drill started?
Probably 15 yards or so away, and then the tackler would come in and they would make contact.
Okay, so let's just walk through one of these rounds of this drill. How did that first round start?
The first round started normally. Rory would start out dribbling, and then the tackler comes in and does the tackle. And then once Rory's tackled, then she goes back up, and then the next tackler comes in, like we're in a line, and we all have to go and do it.
Okay, so you mentioned that Rory was tackled.
Mm-hmm.
Did she fall to the floor?
Yeah, she fell.
And after that first time that she fell to the floor, what happened?
I'm sorry, one moment. She fell to the floor, but she got back up and went back and did the drill again a few times.
How did she get back up?
She had to just pull herself back up and then go back to the start so she could do the drill again.
Did anyone help her up?
I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Just one moment, Your Honor. Ms. Taylor, Ms. Saracen, is your memory exhausted as to how Rory got back up?
Absolutely, because just that whole day was kind of a blur at this point.
Would showing you your deposition refresh your recollection?
Absolutely.
Rory, Ms. Saracen, I would like to direct your attention to page 11 of your deposition.
Okay.
And go ahead and read that page, look it over, and when your memory has been refreshed, go ahead and look up.
So Jess, our trainer, helped Rory up that day.
Is it your testimony that Jess is actually who helped Rory up, Ms. Saracen?
Yes.
So, Ms. Saracen, you gave a deposition in this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were both there?
Yes.
And there was a court reporter there?
Yes.
And that court reporter took down everything that was said, correct?
Yes.
And you were under an oath?
Yes, I was.
That same oath you're under right now, right?
Correct.
And counsel, turning your attention to page 11 of Ms. Saracen's deposition. I'm sorry, I will start on page 10, line 22.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on the wrong deposition. Line 22 of that deposition.
So, Ms. Saracen, I'll just go ahead with this. So you were asked this question and gave this answer, right? All right. So what did you see next? Answer. Coach blew the whistle and Rory started dribbling the ball forward slowly. At the same time, one of our other teammates.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, I would just ask that opposing counsel give the witness to refresh her recollection with the correct deposition before she begins to read the deposition onto the record.
Ms. Garcia?
I can go ahead and do that, Your Honor. That's fine.
If I could just have one moment. Oh, right. I'm sorry. I totally forgot. But Coach Taylor actually was the one that pulled Rory up.
Okay, no problem, Ms. Saracen. I know this is a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
So after that first drill, when Rory fell down, Coach Taylor is the one who pulled her up.
Right. And she actually, I remember it now, she pulled her up quite violently, like yanked her up and made her go run again.
How many times did this drill occur?
She ran about 15 times, I think.
And each time, what happened?
Each time she fell again and she'd get knocked over again and have to go run.
After that 15th time, what happened then?
That time she collapsed and it was a little bit different and she started kind of convulsing and moaning. And it was really scary.
What happened to Rory?
So she, I mean, I don't really know. She was having some sort of a seizure. She was convulsing. And then we called the ambulance, but ambulance didn't make it in time. And Rory died.
Just a few more questions here about practice that day. Do you remember if you got any water breaks that day?
I mean, we always had water on hand, but I don't remember having a break between Burma and the slide tackle drill.
And you mentioned, and finally, when you did get a break, typically during practice, where would that break occur?
Usually just on the field or on the side of the field.
Was there any shade?
No.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Aubrey.
Good morning.
My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I have some more questions for you on behalf of your coach, Taylor, okay?
Mhm.
If at any time my audio cuts out or my video drops, just flag it for me and let me know, all right?
Will do.
Well, I'd like to start off by talking about your time on the Waco High soccer team. You've been on that team for 4 years now, right?
That's correct.
And Coach Taylor has been your coach for all 4 years.
Yes.
And over those 4 years, you've had a pretty successful season, right?
Yes.
And you have successful seasons because you guys practice all the time, right?
And we have good players. Yes.
Coach Taylor was the one who would run these practices.
Yes.
Before September 7th, 2018, no one had ever died at one of Coach's practices, right?
No.
Before September 7th, 2018, you'd never seen anyone get seriously injured at one of Coach Taylor's practices?
Not seriously. I mean, Rory broke her nose during a game once, but not seriously.
But that wasn't during one of Coach Taylor's practices, that was during a game.
Right.
And you yourself, you've never felt unsafe being at one of Coach Taylor's practices, is that right?
Not unsafe.
Oh, on September 7th, 2018, you told us that you were running Burma Road, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And at some point, Coach Taylor sent Rory over to join you.
Yes.
You had already been running Burma Road for quite a while at that point, right?
Right.
And when Rory came to join you, you were able to keep running Burma Road alongside her.
Right.
At that point, you didn't feel sick, right?
No, but no, I didn't.
And Miss Saracen, you weren't on drugs that day, were you?
No.
At this time, you realized that Rory was turning kind of pale, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And Rory was turning kind of pale only after a few minutes of running Burma Road, right?
Right, but she had also been playing really hard at practice, so I think that, you know, she could have been pale before she started running Burma too.
Well, just to be clear, you only realized that she was turning pale after she came to join you on Burma Road, right?
Right.
She didn't look pale as soon as she got there?
I don't think so.
She didn't look pale to you during the practice?
No.
Now, just to be clear, when you noticed that Rory was looking pale after she came to join you, you were standing right next to her, isn't that right?
That's right.
And Coach Taylor, she wasn't standing right next to Rory.
No.
Now, Coach Taylor was actually pretty far away from Rory at that point.
She was about 20 yards away.
And it was at that point when Coach Taylor was standing pretty far away, that's when Rory told you she was feeling funny, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
You never heard Rory say that she was feeling funny to Coach Taylor, right?
No, because Coach would have made her run more Burma or do some other drill. That was kind of Coach's style.
So bringing you back to my question, you never heard Rory tell Coach Taylor that she was feeling funny?
No, I think that she wouldn't want to have to do more drills.
And she never said anything to Coach Taylor about how she was feeling.
No.
And Rory just kept running alongside you, is that right?
Yeah, I think she just wanted to finish out what Coach had her do.
After a while, Rory got called back to the main practice field, right?
Right.
And at this point, Coach Taylor ordered you all to do slide tackling drills with her.
Yes.
A slide tackling, that's something that happens, you'd say, in every soccer game.
Probably. It's a pretty common tactic.
And you've actually practiced slide tackling yourself.
Of course.
You've practiced them at Coach Taylor's practices before.
Yes.
When you perform a slide tackle, you're sliding feet first into the player with the ball, right?
Right.
And the goal of this maneuver is to get the ball away from that person who has it.
Yes.
You don't have to knock the person over to get the ball, right?
No, but it happens a lot of the time.
In fact, if you knock the person over with the ball, you're in danger of getting a yellow card.
If it happens pretty egregiously, yeah.
Now, this slide tackling, it's not a football tackle, right?
No, it's feet first, like you said.
So the tackling player doesn't hit the other player in the head.
Not in the head, but like I said, they can knock their feet out from under them, and so it's pretty common that people fall.
And the tackling player doesn't hit the other player in the chest.
No, but they could easily injure their chest if they fell to the ground.
Well, you'd say that these slide tackles, they're not usually dangerous, right?
They don't have to be, but if everything's moving quickly, then they can be.
But not usually.
They don't, it's not part of the tactic itself.
Now, on your direct examination, you said that Rory looked pretty bad when these drills were happening, right?
I mean, yeah, she was getting knocked down constantly.
But at this point, you weren't standing next to her, were you?
No.
You were still over running Burma Road?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that a yes? So when you were running Burma Road, that's about 20 yards away from where the slide tackling drills were happening, right?
Yes.
But from even 20 yards away, you were able to see pretty clearly what was happening on the field.
Yes.
So you'd agree with me that Rory was not lifeless when she was doing this drill, was she?
No.
In fact, you saw Rory follow the instructions and run the drill.
Yes.
And when Coach Taylor blew the whistle, you saw Rory dribble the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
She did that without assistance.
Yes.
And you saw the other players execute the slide tackles.
Yes.
And you saw Rory get back into position to run the drill again, right? And in the time before that 15th tackle, you never saw Rory lose consciousness.
No.
You never saw Rory vomit.
No.
You never saw Rory unable to dribble the ball.
No.
You never saw Rory unable to follow directions.
No.
You never heard Rory tell Coach that something was wrong.
No, but like I said, Coach would have made her run Burma again or something worse. So no.
Aubrey, before this drill started, did you think that Rory was going to die?
No, she was acting funny, but I mean, I would never think she was going to die.
Before this drill started, did you know that Rory had cocaine in her system?
No.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why you might be here today. Your friendship with Rory, it started before you were on the same soccer team, right?
Right. We've known each other for years.
You actually played youth soccer together,
Yes.
and you were very close friends.
Yeah, she was my best friend.
On the other hand, you're not the biggest fan of Coach Taylor, are you?
Is anybody? No.
And you think that you're smarter than Coach Taylor.
I think Coach uses her intimidation because she doesn't think that she's as smart as any of us.
You said on your direct examination that you don't hold a grudge against Coach Taylor because of what happened, but you think that everyone on the team, every single high school student, is smarter than Coach Taylor will ever be. Is that right?
I don't know if I think that. I think that Coach thinks that.
And you would agree?
Not necessarily, but I mean, yeah, there are times when I think I'm probably smarter than Coach.
And it's safe to say that on top of all of that, you blame Coach Taylor for what happened to your best friend.
Absolutely.
After Rory passed away, no doctors ever told you that Coach Taylor was to blame for Rory's death, did they?
No doctors ever spoke to me.
No police officers ever told you that Coach Taylor was to blame?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. May I be heard?
Okay.
Your Honor, whether or not any officer ever spoke to Ms. Saracen about Rory or whose fault it was has no relevance to whether or not Coach Taylor was acting as a reasonable person would have acted under the circumstances in this case. And that is what is at issue in this case.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 104E, this is going to attack the credibility of the witness. The bias of the witness or potential bias is always relevant to a case. Ms. Saracen is here testifying on behalf of the plaintiff, on behalf of the parent of her best friend, and against Coach Taylor, who we've established she doesn't have a nice relationship with and that she doesn't like very much. The fact that she blames Coach Taylor for Rory Street's death without being told that by an actual authority figure certainly goes against the credibility of her opinion.
Your objection's overruled. Proceed with your examination, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. So Aubrey, no police officers ever told you that Coach Taylor was to blame for what happened to Rory.
No, but why would they? I'm just another person on the team.
You never saw anyone on the news blame Coach Taylor for what happened to Rory.
No, but I was there and I can see that it was Coach Taylor's fault.
And that's your opinion, right? Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Now, Ms. Saracen, you were just asked if anyone had ever died at one of Coach Taylor's practices, but had this particular slide tackling drill ever been run before?
This drill was a little unusual. No.
And so each time Rory was tackled during this drill, what happened to her?
She fell and she had to get back up.
And what did Rory look like while she was running this drill?
Bad. She looked really rough. She was pale and didn't look well.
And finally, Ms. Saracen, what effect, if any, did Coach Taylor's decision to replace you as a starter on the team have on you?
I mean, I was really upset at first, obviously, because I wanted to be a starter, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not the best on the team. So I think it was probably a fine decision.
Does that decision affect any testimony that you have given here today?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. If there's nothing further from the plaintiff, we will move on to your next witness. Ms. Saracen, you can step down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff has no more live witnesses, but at this time we would like to go ahead and read in some deposition testimony of Jordan Street.
Very well.
If my co-counsel could come up. Okay. Turning your attention to page 1, line 6 of the Street deposition. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
How old are you?
I'm 55 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco and I have all my life.
Are you married?
I'm not. I was married, but my spouse passed away several years ago.
Do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Jumping down to line 23, what happened to Rory?
She died at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Now jumping to page 3, line 20. When did Rory start playing soccer?
Oh gosh, when she was little, 4 or 5 years old. I went and signed her up to get her started with just being out and being athletic and being around other kids, but she took right to it and never looked back. Before you knew it, we were spending weekends driving all over Texas to soccer tournaments, and the next 12 or so years were just kind of a blur. Soccer tournaments, soccer practices, soccer camps, soccer everything.
Turning to page 7, line 13. You told us earlier that you've lived in Waco your entire life. Did you go to Waco High?
Yes, I did. I'm a Lion through and through.
When you were at Waco High, did you play any sports?
I played soccer just like Rory, but we won a state championship while I was there.
When you were playing soccer at Waco High, did you ever have to run Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it, or if we weren't in the correct position or something, coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep doing it when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Do you know what a slide tackle is?
Sure.
And jumping to page 9, line 3. Is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is, but that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them. Rory knew how to slide tackle and how to avoid them. This was about punishment. Coach Taylor lost her temper and went too far. That drill wasn't necessary. And all the time that I've played, coached, and watched soccer, I've never seen a drill like that. Not once.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination, Ms. Dworkin?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Flynn, I'll be starting on page 3, line 1. Were you there at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
So do you have any information or knowledge about what happened that day?
No, other than what I heard from others about what happened, but I didn't see it.
And skipping to page 8, line 5. Are slide tackles part of the game of soccer?
Of course they are. Turn on any game and you're going to see players at every level performing slide tackles. That is part of the deal.
Thank you. Nothing further that I'd like to read at this time, Your Honor.
Anything further from the plaintiff?
Plaintiff rests, Your Honor.
All right. Do we have anything we need to take up before moving on to the defense case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I would move for a Rule 52C motion for a judgment on partial findings. At this point, the plaintiff had the burden of proof to prove during their case in chief that what happened to Rory Street was foreseeable to Coach Taylor, and that what Coach Taylor's actions that day proximately caused the death of Rory Street, and we haven't heard sufficient evidence that a reasonable fact finder could find in favor of the plaintiff at this point. No one has said that Coach Taylor could have foreseen what happened to Rory Street that day.
Any response from the defense, from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Your Honor, viewing the evidence that has been presented today in the light most favorable to the non-movement, which is us, the plaintiffs in this case, we believe that this motion should be denied. We have demonstrated that Rory's death was brought on by overexertion in the heat, overexertion that was forced by the defendant by making her run Burma Road and making her run this slide tackling drill after she looked pale and lifeless. We have seen that she, Coach Taylor, did not act as a reasonable person would have under those same circumstances, and that this was her fault and her fault alone.
Your motion will be denied.
Yes, Your Honor.
Before we take up the defense's case in chief, I'm going to quickly give you a time check. We'll take about a minute, 2 minutes break and come back at 10:03. All right, are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
I have 29 minutes and 2 seconds remaining for the plaintiff and 38 minutes, 24 seconds remaining for the defense. Ms. Dworkin,
Thank you, Your Honor.
you can start your case in chief whenever you're ready.
Before we call our first witness, I would like to take this time to read portions of pre-admitted exhibits onto the record. Starting with Exhibit 15, the Toxicology Report. Mr. Flynn, if you could please publish that. Thank you. I just wanted to note for the court that this is Rory Street's toxicology report, and under the toxicology screen for Rory Street's blood, I wanted to point out that it was positive for cocaine with an amount of 60 nanograms per milliliter. And then I'd like to turn to the pre-admitted exhibit of the report of Mr. Spencer London. That's Exhibit 18. And on the second page of this report, under overview of opinion, it states, here is the opinion I have reached in this case based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty. Rory Street's death was caused at least in part by the use of cocaine. And moving on to the third page in the first paragraph, Dr. McConaughey describes the following symptoms for Rory Street on the day in question: struggling, unusually pale, feeling funny, complained of chest pain, hands on his or her hips, breathing heavy, groaning, twitching, and convulsing. Many of these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use. The following paragraph. Additionally, the autopsy report in this case indicates that Rory Street's heart showed signs of myocarditis, which is an inflammation or swelling of the heart muscle. The last line in that same paragraph, myocarditis is one of the physical symptoms associated with cocaine use, which means this finding is also consistent with cocaine use. And at this time, Your Honor, Ms. Garcia and I had the chance to talk before trial about Exhibit 20. We have stipulated that this is a treatise under Rule 803.18, and we have said that both parties may read certain excerpts of this exhibit onto the record without entering it as an exhibit into evidence. Is that okay with Your Honor at this time?
Ms. Garcia, does that reflect your understanding?
Yes, Your Honor.
No objections?
No
Starting
objections.
with the
You can proceed.
Starting with the, thank you, Your Honor. Starting with the chart on page 3 of this treatise, lists the exertional heat stroke risk factors. I'd like to note that the last factor on this chart is drug abuse, and one of the drugs listed on that chart is cocaine. And then on the next page of that treatise, page 4, under unlocking keys to the heart, it says only 3 to 5% of exertional heat stroke cases result in death each year. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. You can take that down. And at this time, Your Honor, the defense is prepared to call Reese Taylor to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Reese Taylor.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a varsity soccer coach and I'm a health teacher at Waco High School.
Are you from Waco?
I am born and raised, lived here, was born here, and I've been here for 6 years coaching at Waco High.
Were you a coach anywhere else before you started at Waco High?
Yes, I've been a coach for 26 years. I've pretty much coached everything at this point, but soccer is my favorite. I got especially lucky with the group we had at Waco High on the varsity team.
Has the team been successful since you took over as coach?
Oh yeah, we've had a great run. We won District 5 out of the 6 times. We've made it to regional twice, and we even made it to semis once.
Did you ever coach Rory Street?
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about Rory?
I mean, Rory was incredibly talented. It's a shame what happened to her because she had a really, really bright future ahead of her.
I'd like to talk a little bit about what happened to Rory. Were you at work on September 7th, 2018?
I was.
What were you doing at practice that day?
You know, that day's a little bit hard to talk about just because it's so sad what happened to Rory, but it was a regular practice, about 3:15, 3:30, we went out and it was a scrimmage day. So we were scrimmaging.
Why do you practice at 3:15 or 3:30?
Well, the kids have school during the day, so that's the easiest time of day. And it's good for the players to practice in the heat because it conditions them and gets them ready because that's when their games usually are.
And when they play their normal games, do they play outside in the heat?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with a lot of the games being in Texas. I mean, there's heat most of the year.
And during these practices, are team members allowed to have water?
Oh, well, allowed? Absolutely. I encourage them to have water. They don't even have to bring their own bottles. We have a stand set up and the kids know that they can go get water at any time they want.
What do they have to do to be able to grab water at practice?
Run over the side and get it.
And on September 7th, 2018, was there a trainer on the field?
Oh, absolutely. Our trainer is always on the field. Anytime a kid looks like they may not be feeling well or tells me they don't feel well, I always tell our trainer to make sure they're okay. The kids know they can check in with her if they need to.
So have you sent kids to the trainer before?
Of course, and I've been coaching for 26 years. We play sports outside. Kids are going to get sick, they're going to get injured, and that's why we have the trainer there.
Ms. Taylor, bringing you back to the scrimmage, how would you say Rory was performing that day?
It was a really weird off day for Rory. She is super talented. Had probably a career playing college soccer, and so it was weird to see her missing passes, not in the right position. She was kind of goofing off, just not playing as well as I knew she could. And when players aren't playing well, my number one worry is that if they're playing like this in a game, they're going to miss out on the opportunity to play D1 soccer and especially get those scholarship opportunities that players like Rory deserve.
Did you try to correct her?
I did. I verbally tried to correct her multiple times. I encouraged her to focus, to get in the game, play as well as I knew she knew how, but it just really wasn't working that day.
So what did you do after your verbal instructions weren't working?
Well, when verbally she just didn't seem to be responding, I did what we do really often. I sent her to Burma Road. It's a type of activity we do when the kids aren't necessarily focusing during practice.
Burma Road, this activity, is this something that you came up with?
Oh, no, it's a tradition at Waco High. I even did it when I played at Waco High back in the 90s. Everybody on the team's done it. If you went to Waco High and you played soccer, you've run Burma Road.
And would you just describe what Burma Road is?
Sure, it's a pretty typical soccer drill. The kids run, dribble, fire a shot in open goal. They bear crawl back to the beginning and they do it again.
Sounds pretty tough. How many of your team members can actually complete this exercise?
Oh, all of them can complete it. I mean, these are kids in the best shape of their lives on a varsity soccer team. They're athletes, and every single one of the kids has done it before.
And you said that you've been doing this exercise since the 1990s. To the best of your knowledge, has anyone ever died after running Burma Road?
Oh, absolutely not.
When you sent Rory over to run Burma Road that day, did you notice anything unusual about her appearance?
No.
Did you think that she looked like she needed to see the trainer?
No, absolutely not.
Did she say anything at that point about feeling bad?
No.
Did she say that she wanted a break?
No.
If Rory had said that she needed a break, would you have given her one?
Of course, if an athlete like Rory is telling me that they need a break, then they need a break, and I would have respected that.
After you sent Rory out to run Burma Road, what happened?
Well, she just was still not playing well, and she was still goofing off. It just seemed like the drill still wasn't working, and sometimes if the kids still aren't responding to Burma Road, I implement another activity to try to get them refocused and get them in the game.
What activity did you end up implementing at that point?
Well, that specific day, I decided that we would do a slide tackle drill. A slide tackle is a pretty typical maneuver in soccer. It's a way of taking the ball from your opponent. And so it seemed like a good idea to get Rory back into the game.
Was the goal of that exercise to tackle Rory to the ground?
No, the goal of a slide tackle is to, like I said, take the ball from the opponent. So the goal was just for the other players to try to get the ball from Rory.
If done correctly, does the player who has the ball have to fall to the ground?
Yeah.
And do you practice these slide tackles often?
Oh yeah, a slide tackle is extremely common in soccer, especially at the varsity level, high school students. So it's practiced very often.
During these slide tackles, did Rory ever ask you for a break?
No, she didn't appear more sweaty or tired than any of the other kids.
And other than that, was there anything off about her appearance?
No, she was struggling like you normally would after practicing intensely, but really nothing appeared off to me.
You said that she looked like she was struggling. Was that to the point of maybe needing medical attention?
No, just the normal amount that any athlete struggles during a hard drill.
And during your years of coaching experience, have you seen players who looked like they needed medical attention?
All of the time. I mean, like I said earlier, we're in Texas. It gets really hot here. People are going to struggle. Kids are going to forget to drink enough water. And anytime that happens, I send them to the trainer.
Did Rory look like that?
No.
Miss Taylor, to your knowledge, doing these slide tackle drills for many years, has anyone ever died doing this drill?
No.
Oh, Ms. Taylor, with the permission of the court, I'm going to publish an exhibit that's been admitted pre-trial. That's Exhibit 15.
Okay.
You may.
Mr. Flynn, could you please publish Exhibit 15? Ms. Taylor, I'm showing you Rory Street's toxicology report. Sorry. From the day that she died. Do you see what it says about her her status of cocaine in her system?
Yeah, I do.
What does that say?
It says that her blood tested positive for cocaine.
When Rory showed up for practice that day, did you know that she was on cocaine?
Of course not. If I had any idea that one of my players was under the influence of cocaine, I wouldn't have even allowed them to practice that day. I had absolutely no idea that a high school athlete on my team who I thought of as one of my own children would be on cocaine when they came to practice.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination, Ms. Garcia.
Miss Taylor, I want to touch briefly on your coaching background. So you've said that you've been a coach for about 26 years, right?
Yeah,
And you've coached soccer for 20 seasons.
I have, yes.
Specifically, you've coached soccer at Waco High for about 6 now.
Yes, I've been at Waco High for about 6 years.
Now, you push your players, right, Coach Taylor?
I push them to be the best players they can be. So I push them to reach their full potential so that they can hopefully get everything that they can out of the sport.
So that's a yes, that you push your players.
Yes, of course.
And you care for them like they're your own children.
Yes.
And your own child actually is on this team, correct?
Yes, which makes this specific group even more special to me.
Now, Coach Taylor, you'd agree that it's important to follow the most up-to-date coaching practices when it comes to coaching your team.
Sure. There's lots of different coaching styles. I'm a health teacher, so I tend to think that, while people have different styles, it's best to stay up to date with what ideas people have.
And you do make sure that you stay up to date on these, right?
Of course.
You attend coaching clinics all over the state of Texas.
Yeah, it's a good way to see what other coaches are doing, see if they have any good ideas I can implement, stay connected with other coaches.
And you follow best practices for coaching.
I follow what my 26 years of experience and my education and health tell me is the best way to create a successful team.
So, Coach Taylor, you attended one particular conference on June 15th, 2018, right?
Yes.
That conference was put on by the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association.
Yeah.
And at that conference, they covered how to act during hot weather practices.
I think they covered some ideas that coaches might want to keep in mind for hot weather practices, just because Texas is so hot.
And you learned that when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above.
Objection, Your Honor. I believe that opposing counsel is about to elicit hearsay statements.
May I respond, Your Honor? Your Honor, this information is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but instead for the effect on the listener, that Coach Taylor went to this conference and was put on notice as to what coaches should do in these situations.
Your objection. Did you have a—
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Briefly.
Yes, we do believe that opposing counsel is using these statements to prove the truth of the matter asserted, that these are the best practices. That goes beyond the knowledge that Coach Taylor had at the time, that she had noticed that these practices existed, but to say that these are the best practices and something that Coach Taylor had to do, that is absolutely the truth of the matter asserted.
Do you have a response, Ms. Garcia?
Yes, Your Honor. Again, we're not offering this to say that these practices are the best practices, but merely that Coach Taylor was on notice that this is what was recommended, not for the actual truth of the matter.
Ms. Workin, I'm going to overrule your objection, but also tell you, Ms. Garcia, confine your testimony to what Coach Taylor was on notice for, and don't go into whether or not this was a best practice that was put out.
Yes, Your Honor. So Coach Taylor, at this conference, you learned that when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above, practices should include breaks.
Well, I learned that was something that people were suggesting might be a good idea. These aren't rules that are put out. It's one of several coaches associations, and it's some ideas for us to continue trying to be better.
Right, but at this particular conference, it was recommended that when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above, coaches should give breaks.
Yeah, it was recommended at that particular conference.
And at this conference, it was also recommended that practices shouldn't exceed 2 hours.
I believe so, yeah.
And that water should be available to players, correct?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, and so this coaches conference, it also covered a bit about slide tackling,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And same thing, you learned that mistimed tackles can cause serious injury.
Yeah, of course, slide tackles can cause serious injuries. A lot of maneuvers in sports at this level can cause injuries.
And that coaches should instruct their players to watch the ball during a slide tackle.
Sure.
And that they should tell their players to make sure that the opponent separates from the ball before engaging in the tackle.
Sure.
And you learned that coaches should tell their players not to tackle unless it's necessary.
Yes, you shouldn't do any type of move in soccer unless it's necessary.
So I want to talk to you about the day of Rory's death now.
Okay.
You stated that practice started around 3:15 or 3:30.
Yeah.
That was usual start time, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Was that a yes?
Yeah, that was the normal start time.
And it was over 100 degrees at practice that day.
Sure, it was hot. It was September in Texas, so kind of unavoidable.
So is that a yes that it was over 100 degrees?
I'm not positive what the exact temperature was, but I'm sure that that's true.
Ms. Taylor, at this time, I want to show you and turn your attention to Exhibit 21, which has already been admitted into evidence. If my co-counsel could put that up on the screen as well,
Okay.
with Your Honor's permission.
You may.
And if we could, Okay, perfect. So Coach Taylor, looking at this exhibit, this is a weather report from September 7th, 2018. You said practice started around 3:15. At 2:51 p.m., it was 103 degrees, correct?
I actually cannot see.
Or, I'm sorry, 100 degrees.
Mine cuts off a little early. But yes, that's what it says.
Okay, and I was actually misspoken. At 2:51, it was 100 degrees, correct?
Yes.
And at 3:51, it was 103 degrees.
Yes.
Okay, we can take that down now. Thank you. And so, Coach Taylor, there was no shade on your field, right?
No, most soccer fields don't have shade.
And there were no tents up on your field.
Not on the field. They couldn't play soccer on the field if there were tents up.
There were no tents on the side of the field, right?
There is places to find shade outside of the field, but no, not anywhere that the players are standing during practice.
So on the actual soccer field itself, there was no shade.
No, of course not.
So I want to move on to Rory now. She was your best soccer player.
Yeah, she was a really, really talented girl, and it's devastating what happened.
She was one of the best players you've ever coached.
Yeah, I would say that I will never forget Rory's talent. It was an honor to coach her.
And typically, Rory appeared superhuman at practice.
Sometimes I was very shocked almost with how talented she was. It was like she had a raw ability to play the sport.
That's a yes, she appeared superhuman.
Yeah.
But on this day in particular, you thought she was dogging it.
Yeah, she wasn't playing up to her abilities at all.
Something just seemed off that day.
Yeah, it did.
You never asked her if anything was wrong.
No, I mean, I verbally was trying to correct her. She was playing off of her game. That was the only thing that seemed off about her. It's just she wasn't playing up to her abilities.
But Coach Taylor, my question was, you never asked her if anything was wrong.
No, other than trying to verbally correct her.
So you didn't ask, you just told.
I did what coaches do, and I continued to coach her.
And that's a no. You never asked her if anything was wrong.
No, I didn't.
But you did send her to run Burma Road, right?
Yeah, just like I do almost every practice to specific players.
And while she was running Burma Road, you still thought she was goofing off.
She was still goofing off. She wasn't taking it seriously. She was missing shots. Again, she continued to not play up to her ability.
She wasn't hustling, right?
No, I mean, which makes sense now that I know that she was under the influence of drugs when she was at practice.
But you didn't know she was under any influence at that time, did you?
Of course not. If I had known that she was under the influence of cocaine, I wouldn't have let her continue to practice. I wouldn't have let her come to practice.
But at that time, without any other knowledge, the knowledge you had in those circumstances, you thought that she was just being lazy.
Well, yes, that's what it appeared. It appeared that she just wasn't playing as well as she normally does. And not necessarily lazy, but she wasn't taking it seriously. She was just not playing as well as she normally does.
Let's talk about what happened next. You decided to change up the drill.
I decided to implement a new drill since the one that I had used to try to correct her performance wasn't working.
It was a drill that you had never used before.
Yeah, a lot of times in practice, if there's a specific thing I want to do, I try to make new drills. That's part of keeping up with them, being a good coach.
So that's a yes. You had never used this drill before.
No, not this specific one.
And it was a slide tackling drill, right?
It was, yes.
So you lined up your team about 10 yards away from Rory.
Yeah, so I lined them up, and I had them, when I blew the whistle, she was to dribble, and they were going to try to take the ball from her via a slide tackle.
Right. So every time you blew your whistle, one player would come off the line.
It was kind of like that.
So you blow your whistle, and that's a signal to whoever's in front of the line that the drill is starting.
Yes.
That player would then run towards Rory.
Yeah, they would do a slide tackle. It's like, it's a normal move used, but you slide on the ground to try to take the ball from your opponent.
Right. So then the player would slide tackle Rory, right? Whoever was in front of the line.
They're slide tackling the ball, but yes.
And after Rory would go through this drill once, you had her line back up on her line.
Yes.
And this didn't just happen once.
No, it happened about 14, 15 times.
Right. It happened 15 times, right?
14 or 15, I believe.
And throughout this whole drill, it was still over 100 degrees.
Yes, that was the temperature. It's Texas in September.
You just kept blowing that whistle until finally Rory didn't get up.
Well, I was blowing the whistle like I normally do in a drill to let the students know, to let the kids know when to go.
But you finally stopped blowing the whistle because Rory didn't get up, did she?
No. Yeah, I mean, I had to stop at that point.
And at no point during that drill did you check to see how Rory was doing.
It didn't appear that she needed to be checked on. And we do drills that are really hard during practice all the time. And she's never had any response like this. She didn't look different than normal, other than normal struggling for an athlete during a drill.
Is that a no, that at no point during that drill did you check to see if Rory was okay?
No, none of us did.
And at no point during that drill did you give her or any of her other teammates a break?
Not during the middle of a drill, no.
And to this day, Coach Taylor, you feel you have no responsibility for what happened.
I mean, I think what happened to Rory is absolutely devastating, and I'm so sad that it happened. But the coaching I was doing that day was no more different than the coaching I've been doing for 26 years. So I don't see what I could have done to prevent that. So I don't think there's any use in holding myself responsible.
And to this day, Coach, you wouldn't do anything differently, would you?
What I would do differently is if I had known that she was on cocaine, I just wouldn't have allowed her to come to practice. But I couldn't have known that she was on cocaine at that time. That's what I would do differently if I had known.
Coach, is it your testimony that to this day you would do something differently?
No, not specifically with the knowledge I had that day.
I'm sorry, is it your testimony that you would do things differently?
No,
You wouldn't do things differently.
I would not do things differently.
No further questions.
Redirect examination. May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Taylor, Ms. Garcia just asked you some questions about a conference that you attended back in 2018. Do you remember being at that conference?
I do.
This conference, who was there? Who was putting it on?
It's the Texas High School Soccer Coach Association. It's just another coaches organization in Texas that I'm a part of.
Is that a national organization, or is it just high school coaches getting together?
It's just high school coaches getting together in Texas specifically.
At any time, did anyone at that meeting tell you that those practices were mandatory?
No, absolutely not. They're not rules for how to conduct a practice. Like I said, they're just kind of suggestions on what a group of coaches thinks would be good ideas.
Did anyone ever say that those were best practices?
No.
Ms. Garcia said that one of those recommendations was to give people breaks. Were people allowed to take breaks on your field?
Absolutely. Like I said, we have water on the side and we do take breaks during practice.
And she said that practices are not to exceed 2 hours. On September 7th, 2018, was your practice longer than 2 hours?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
If the defense is finished with this witness, then Coach Taylor, you can step down.
We are finished, Your Honor.
Ms. Working, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to call Jess Merriweather by deposition. May I proceed?
You may.
All right, Mr. Flynn, I'll be starting on page 2, line 6. Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I am 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple of years now. I grew up in Houston, then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple of years at another high school in College Station before I got the job at Waco High.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I'm an athletic trainer and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape, and to treat any injuries that they have.
Do you attend practices?
Yes. Depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there is always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
How long have you been an athletic trainer?
About 2 years now.
And skipping to line 24 on that same page, are you familiar with Coach Reese Taylor?
I am.
Who is Coach Taylor?
Coach Taylor is the varsity soccer coach at Waco High.
Have you worked with Coach Taylor?
I have.
In what capacity?
As a trainer. So I've attended soccer practices and soccer games where Coach Taylor was the coach. I've worked with Coach Taylor in order to treat injured players, and I've worked with Coach Taylor just overseeing the students during practices and games.
And skipping ahead to line 18 on that same page, do you know who Rory Street was?
Yeah, I knew Rory. Very sad what happened.
How did you know Rory?
Well, she was a varsity soccer player, so I worked with her as a trainer for the varsity soccer team, just like any other player.
Then skipping ahead to line 15 on that next page, what about cocaine? How does that affect an athlete?
Cocaine is particularly dangerous. It killed Len Bias and Don Rogers. Diego Maradona had a 20-year addiction that derailed his career. Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden also come to mind.
I'll be skipping ahead to page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Line 18. At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated that he was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here is the thing. I'm there to take care of these players and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and she would have. Rory was a tough kid, but she knew her limits and would let me or coach know when she needed water.
Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Skipping ahead to line 21. Based on your knowledge and experience in the field of physical education and sports training, do you think that Coach Taylor's means of disciplining Rory Street on the day in question were reasonable or appropriate?
I don't think they were unusual at all. Coach Taylor is a winning coach that pushes players, but Coach Taylor is also concerned about player safety. We talk about it all the time. So I would term Coach Taylor's conduct and approach to discipline as orthodox in every sense of the word.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I was planning on reading at this time.
Ms. Garcia, do you have any cross-examination you'd like to read in?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed.
Okay, turning to page 3, line 19. You told us earlier that you were 28 years old. Is that a pretty common age for an athletic trainer in your position?
Well, I am the youngest trainer in the Waco Independent School District. In fact, I'm the youngest one ever in the history of the position. So I guess that gives you your answer.
And to page 8, line 10. Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening and I certainly saw parts of it, but I did not watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
And page 10, line 6. Do you still work at Waco High?
Yeah, I got promoted to head trainer about 2 months ago, so it's going great.
Do you still work with Coach Taylor?
Of course I do. I work with all the coaches, Coach Taylor included. In fact, Coach Taylor is the one that wrote me the recommendation letter for the promotion to head trainer. Again, Coach Taylor has a lot of faith in me and my abilities, and I just want to try to impress her.
Nothing further from this witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Dworkin? At this time, Your Honor, the defense rests our case in chief, but we would also like to renew our renew our motion for a Rule 52C motion for a judgment on partial findings. At this point, we still have a good faith belief that the plaintiff has not met their burden and that a reasonable fact finder could not find in their favor. Specifically, we have now introduced evidence that Rory Taylor may have also been to blame for her own death, and we believe that her actions are more than 50% to blame, which means that Coach Taylor could not possibly be found liable at this time.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests on its previous argument, viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, which is us. We have demonstrated that Coach Taylor's actions on that day went beyond what a reasonable person in those circumstances would have done. Additionally, defense has said that they raised the cocaine issue, but Your Honor, there are expert reports that are already in evidence, and you will see when you see those expert reports that the cocaine, it cannot be said that that cocaine was ingested before practice, at any point immediately before practice. Your Honor, considering all of this evidence in the light most favorable to the plaintiff, we believe that a reasonable fact finder could find that Coach Taylor is responsible for Rory Street's death.
I'm going to stand with my previous ruling and deny your motion. Anything else we need to take up before we move on to closing arguments?
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
Nothing from the plaintiff.
All right, then I am going to finish up with the time. I will let you know how much time you have left, and we will start closing arguments at 10:43. Are the parties ready to proceed with closing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
The plaintiff has 13 minutes, 24 seconds left. Defense, you have 20 minutes, 58 seconds left. Ms. Garcia, you can proceed with your closing whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, I would also like to request any remaining time that I have left over for rebuttal.
Granted.
Unforgiving, intense, unrelenting, heartless. Your Honor, those words describe not only the Texas heat on September 7th, 2018, but they describe the defendant, Reese Taylor. Ms. Taylor is an educator and coach who is entrusted with the health and well-being of young students on a daily basis. And on September 7th, 2018, her negligence, her anger, and her utter disregard for the health of her players caused the death of one of Waco's most promising young athletes, Rory Street. As counsel for plaintiff, we bear the burden of demonstrating by a preponderance of the evidence that Ms. Taylor's actions caused Rory Street's death. Specifically, the verdict forms in this case raise two questions, which we have answered. First, did the negligence of Reese Taylor proximately caused the accident in question? And if so, what percentage of the blame does Ms. Taylor bear? Your Honor, the evidence today has shown not only that Reese Taylor proximately caused the accident, but that she bears 100% of the blame. To demonstrate Reese Taylor's negligence, we had to show that she failed to do what a person of ordinary prudence would have done in similar circumstances. Now, luckily, we don't have to look too far to find that standard. September afternoons in Texas heat are nothing short of unforgiving. That's why the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association issues suggestions and they tell coaches how they should act. And Reese Taylor didn't follow those suggestions. Water breaks? Aubrey Saracen had run Burma Road for 15 minutes by the time Rory joined her. Then the slide tackling drill happened, and no breaks were given at any point during that period of time that lasted more than 15 minutes. In fact, Coach Taylor did the opposite of give breaks from the heat. She sent her star player to go run Burma Road because she was having an off day. She missed some passes. She couldn't finish a couple shots. But to Coach Taylor, Rory was slacking, mailing it in, weak. The only way to correct course was to punish. And the only way to punish was through hard physical strain, starting on Burma Road. A humiliating punishment that left Rory crawling on her arms and legs in front of all of her friends. And when Rory's performance on Burma Road wasn't up to par, Coach Taylor truly sought to inflict pain. She ignored suggestions from the Coaches Association, and she inflicted slide tackles on Rory, a barrage of them, each one unnecessary, each one worse than the last. Now, defense is going to try to argue that Coach Taylor had no way of knowing what was going on, that she was yards away from Rory. But Miss Saracen told you what was happening up close. Pale skin, chest pains, a complete struggle. And soon, Coach Taylor knew it too, because you heard from Miss Saracen that right after the slide tackling drill started, Coach Taylor got very close to Rory. In fact, Coach Taylor yanked Rory up by her jersey and sent her back to the line to start another round of the drill, to wait for the whistle that would bring on yet another tackle, the whistle that would inflict yet more misery, the whistle that would make the unbearable heat and exhaustion even worse. The whistle that was blown by none other than Coach Taylor herself. 15 times she blew that whistle into the 100-degree heat at her struggling star player. With no breaks, with no water, and not once stopping to ask Rory if she felt okay. 15 times Coach Taylor ordered a slide tackle. She may as well have been tackling Rory herself. Your Honor, this isn't discipline. This isn't hit your passes and make your shots. This is humiliation, plain and simple. This is making kids run on their hands and legs 60 yards until the coach feels like they've done enough. This is making teenagers slide tackle their friend to the ground over and over again. People Rory were supposed to go to battle with, people she was supposed to win with, people who were supposed to have her back. Coach Taylor turned them against Rory. Not to teach Rory a lesson, but to humiliate her. Now, the defense wants you to think that this is Rory's fault because of the small amount of cocaine that was found in her blood. But even the defendant's expert describes that amount that was found in her blood as nominal. It was a trace amount. They want you to think that Rory's wobbly passes and her errant shots were because of the drug. But don't forget, those wobbly passes and those errant shots happens throughout practice. And our expert report, which is in evidence already, shows that confusion, dizziness, and disorientation are signs of heat exhaustion. Rory complained of chest pain, and the defense expert can only tell you that it might be linked to other symptoms of cocaine use. Defendants can't even tell you when that nominal amount of cocaine was ingested, that amount of cocaine that they claim killed Rory. Your Honor, the Texas heat is unforgiving, intense, unrelenting, heartless, just like Reese Taylor. The heat in itself is dangerous enough. Paired with a hot-tempered soccer coach with a short fuse and corporal punishment at her disposal, heat is deadly. It's a story the Street family knows all too well. Mrs. Street already lost her husband too early. And now she's lost her daughter too. And in a moment, I'll get back up here during rebuttal and I'll ask that you return the only verdict that the evidence in this case supports, that Coach Taylor is 100% responsible for the death of Rory Street. Thank you.
Ms. Dworkin, you can proceed with your closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. You can't prevent what you can't predict. On September 7th, 2018, Coach Taylor showed up for soccer practice at Waco High, just as she had been doing for the past 6 years. The team was running a scrimmage that day, getting ready for their competitive season. As soon as she got to practice, she noticed that something was off with one of her star players. You heard today that Rory was dropping the ball, quite literally. She was goofing off, missing easy passes, wasn't running in good positions, and was even missing wide open goals. Coach tried to correct her verbally. She tried to give her critiques and some criticism, but Rory wasn't listening, and she continued to make mistakes. What Coach didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that Rory wasn't just being lazy. She was under the influence of cocaine. And because Coach had no idea that Rory was under the influence of drugs, she treated Rory just like any other sober player that was goofing off. She sent her to run sprints on Burma Road. At that point, Rory had not asked for a break, had not asked for a sip of water, had not said that she wasn't feeling well. When she thought Rory wasn't taking Burma Road seriously, you heard that Coach Taylor decided to change the drill that she was doing. She wanted to make Rory practice her slide tackling. And at this point, Rory still had not asked for a break, had not gone to get a sip of water, and had not said that she wasn't feeling well. You heard that instead of taking a break, Rory continued to do the slide tackling drill. You heard that she did it quite well. She was able to run when the coach blew the whistle. She dribbled the ball, and her teammates would tackle her. And then each time she got back up and she did it again. And throughout these drills, Rory did not ask for a break, did not ask for a sip of water, and did not say she wasn't feeling well. And all of a sudden, and without warning, Rory dropped. Everyone on the field, including Coach Taylor, stood in shock at what had just happened. Make no mistake. As the defense, we are not here today claiming that Rory Street's death was not a tragedy. But the plaintiff is here today blaming Coach Taylor for causing that death and claiming that that death was somehow foreseeable. Your job today is put emotion aside and determine whether or not that can be true. Now, in blaming Coach Taylor for Rory Street's death, the plaintiff has assumed a burden. They had to prove each and every element of their claim by preponderance of the evidence. They had to prove that Miss Taylor had a duty to Rory, that she somehow breached that duty of care, and that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory's death. With the facts in today's case, they also assumed a duty to prove to you that it was not cocaine that eventually caused Rory Street's death. And if they failed to prove even one of those elements by preponderance of the evidence, you cannot find Coach Taylor liable. And the plaintiff failed to meet that burden today. To prove this, let's walk through these elements one by one. Now, as the defense, we don't dispute that Coach Taylor owed a duty of care to Rory Street. She was the coach, and Rory was the student. What we do contest is that she breached that duty. You heard today about Coach Taylor's practices. They're tough, but they're fair. These kids didn't sign up for bird watching or taking a walk in the park. They signed up for varsity soccer practice. So they had to run, they had to dribble, they had to exercise, and occasionally they had to engage in physical contact or get knocked down. And you heard today that because these practices are tough, it can get quite hot outside. Coach Taylor makes sure that there are water stations set up throughout the entire practice. Players don't even need to bring their own water in order to take a water break. In fact, Coach Taylor encourages the players to take a break whenever they want. Furthermore, Your Honor, you heard today that there is a trainer on site at all times. So if anyone is ever sick, if they're not feeling well, if they think they might be injured, they're sent to the trainer. And all the players have to do is walk over to the sidelines or flag that they need some help. Now, the plaintiff would have you believe that Coach Taylor somehow breached her duty of care by making Rory run Burma Road. But you heard today that Burma Road is a tradition dating back to the 1990s, when Coach Taylor herself was a star soccer player at Waco High. Even Rory Street's mother ran Burma Road when she was a high school student. Players run this all the time without getting hurt, let alone without dying. Rory Street had run this drill many times in the past, flawlessly, on repeat, more than she had to do it on the day in question. In fact, Aubrey Saracen stood before you today and she told you that she was running Burma Road on that very same day in the very same conditions. She was completely fine. The difference between Aubrey and Rory that day was that Rory was on cocaine. Now, the plaintiff would also have you believe that Coach somehow breached her duty of care by making Rory practice these slide tackling drills. But you heard today about how common those slide tackling drills really are. They happen in every single soccer game, and it's both common and necessary to practice these tackles before you actually get out onto the field. Not practicing a slide tackle would be like sending a boxer into the ring without ever practicing getting hit. In fact, it would actually be unsafe not to practice them. And these tackles, they're not football tackles. The goal is not to get the person to hit the ground as hard as they can. You're not supposed to hit the players in the head or hit the players in the chest. You're just supposed to get the ball away from them. That's what Rory was supposed to be practicing. Now, we're not saying that Coach Taylor is perfect. We aren't saying that she's the nicest or even the best coach in Texas. But she doesn't have to be. The law doesn't say that you cannot discipline your team members. The law doesn't say that you cannot run drills. The law doesn't say that you cannot practice in the heat in Waco, Texas. Just that you have to be reasonable when you do. Now, Coach Taylor, she's not on trial for being mean. She's not on trial for hurting a player's feelings or yelling at the team. She's on trial for causing the death of another person. The plaintiff failed to meet their burden here. But even if you do believe that Miss Taylor somehow breached her duty of care to Rory, the plaintiff had more to prove to you. They had to prove that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. That means that not only did they have to prove that Rory's death would not have happened if not for Coach Taylor's actions, but they had to prove that Rory Street's death was foreseeable. Now, Your Honor, we did submit Rory Street's autopsy report in today's case. You'll see that the chief medical examiner did a full examination of Rory after she died. And after doing a thorough examination, he was unable to determine the cause of death that took place in that case. But what we do have is a toxicology report that was done by the same chief medical examiner. Now, Ms. Garcia may be right. We don't know when this cocaine was ingested, but that doesn't matter. We have scientific evidence that shows that that was in her system at the time that she died, 60 nanograms per milliliter. And we know what that means. You're going to have in front of you an expert report from Mr. Spencer London. And in that expert report, he said that all of Rory's symptoms were consistent with drug usage. And we read you excerpts of a treatise that talks about exertional heat stroke. It says that exertional heat stroke only results in death in 3 to 5% of cases. And that risk can be exacerbated by a certain number of risk factors. One of those risk factors is cocaine usage, the same exact drug that was found in Rory Street's system at the time that she died. How are we supposed to know that Rory, a star soccer player in peak physical condition who had practiced in these conditions before, would fall in that 3 to 5%, especially without the knowledge that she had knowingly ingested cocaine, one of the risk factors for heat stroke? But even if we are to believe that it was the heat stroke that caused Rory Street's death, the plaintiff had to prove that her death was somehow foreseeable to Miss Taylor. And they haven't done so. You heard that Rory went from running laps around the field to practicing slide tackles over and over again to suddenly dropping dead in the middle of the field, dead at 18 years old, doing something that she had done in the past, something that everybody else on the field was doing. Now, the plaintiff tried to prove to you that this was somehow foreseeable by putting forth the testimony of Miss Aubrey Saracen. Miss Aubrey Saracen came before you and she tried to say that Rory looked sickly, that she didn't look well. But, Your Honor, you heard that Aubrey Saracen does in fact have a grudge against Coach Taylor. She doesn't like Coach Taylor. And what's more, Miss Saracen is a teenager. She's not a medical professional. She doesn't have years of experience. She's not a personal trainer. She's a teenager. And she tried to tell you that Rory looked sick, but she's just one person. One witness that actually took the stand today and said that that whole day was a blur to her. The plaintiff's star witness. Well, we called 2 other witnesses to the stand, and they told you quite the contrary. Miss Taylor took the stand today, and she told you that throughout the entirety of practice, Rory Street looked fine. She didn't look pale. She wasn't sweating more than usual. She was struggling a little bit with the exercise, but not to the point of needing medical attention. And then you heard testimony from Jess Merriweather, the trainer that was at practice that day. Jess Merriweather said Rory looked fine. Didn't look like she needed medical attention. didn't raise concern to the trainer that is trained to look for this kind of stuff in the players. Yes, it was hot outside, but isn't it always in Waco, Texas? These players are no strangers to running around and practicing in the heat. And as you know, heat stroke only causes death in 3 to 5% of cases, lower than that actually if you're in peak physical condition and a young adult like Rory Street. Now, that's unforeseeable in and of itself. But perhaps what was least foreseeable of all was the fact that Rory had cocaine in her system at the time that she died. You need to think about why this young girl in great shape suddenly dropped dead out of nowhere. You heard today that that drug makes you more susceptible to heat stroke, that it has adverse effects on your body, even if you're not outside in the heat. Rory had cocaine in her system at the time that she died. No one knew this. Aubrey didn't know, her parents didn't know, and Coach Taylor certainly didn't know. Coach Taylor had no idea what Rory was experiencing when she stepped out on the field that day. Had she known that Rory was on cocaine, she probably wouldn't have even let her practice, let alone put her through those drills. She couldn't have possibly predicted this. You can't prevent what you can't predict. The plaintiff failed to meet their burden here. But even if you do believe that what happened to Rory was somehow foreseeable, the plaintiff, they had even more to prove after that. You see, because in the state of Texas, we say that if someone is more than 50% to blame for what happened to themselves, the person at the other end of that wrongful death suit is not responsible. This means that even if you find that Coach Taylor was somewhat responsible for what happened, if Rory herself was more than 50% to blame for her own death, Coach Taylor cannot be held responsible for what happened. And because of this, we have to examine the actions of Rory Street before she died. As the defense, we understand that it's scary for a high schooler to speak up to an authority figure, that it can be scary to show weakness and ask for a break when you need it. But no one knows what's going on inside of your head, inside of your body, better than you do. On the surface, Rory looked fine. Coach Taylor could not foresee what she literally couldn't see in front of her. As the defense, we are not here to make light of what happened on September 7th, 2018. What happened was a tragedy, and Coach Taylor feels awful that the fact that Rory Street died under her watch. We're not here to minimize the loss and the pain that I'm sure Rory Street's family and friends are suffering. And we sympathize with Jordan Street for the loss of her daughter. But we cannot hold Coach Taylor liable for something that she could not have foreseen. You can't prevent what you can't predict. Because of this, I ask that you find the only just verdict in today's case. Find Coach Taylor not liable. Thank you.
Ms. Garcia, you can proceed with your rebuttal. You have 5 minutes and 49 seconds remaining in your time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the defense wants you to believe that Rory died suddenly and without warning, that this was out of nowhere, out of left field. But the evidence has shown the opposite, that it was a gradual and painful struggle. Discipline gone too far. Rory was lifeless. She was doubled over with her hands on her hips. She was struggling. And Coach Taylor still subjected her to drill after drill after drill. Now, defense also wants you to think that this was all normal and routine, that everything that happened that day There was nothing out of the ordinary. That yes, Mrs. Street and Coach Taylor had both run Burma Road before with no problems. That's true. And yes, practicing in 100-degree heat is normal and routine. Sending a player to Burma Road and then bringing them back for a slide tackling drill that has never been done before, merely to inflict pain on them, to teach them a lesson, and to constantly subject them to round after round after round when they are struggling to get back up. There is nothing normal or routine about that, Your Honor. That is pure punishment. Pure evil, Your Honor. The defense also wants you to believe that this is all Rory's fault for a few reasons. But first, because she didn't say anything. She never told Coach Taylor that she felt bad. But Your Honor, like I've said, Rory had her hands on her hips. She was walking slowly. She was pale. She appeared lifeless. And throughout all of that, don't forget, Coach Taylor never asked her if she was okay. Her coach, the person who was responsible for her safety at practice that day. Not once. Not when she was running Burma Road. Not when she was doing the slide tackling drill. Not once. And a reasonable person in those same circumstances would have asked their star player who was struggling to get back up if she was okay. Now, all of Rory's symptoms that day were associated with heat exhaustion or heat stroke. The expert reports you have will say that. And Your Honor, it doesn't matter that Coach Taylor didn't know about that trace amount of cocaine that was in Rory's system. Because the standard here is what a reasonable person would have done in the circumstances as they existed. And based on everything you have seen, Coach Taylor did not act reasonable in the 100-degree heat when he didn't give his players any water breaks from the time that Miss Saracen started running Burma Road to the time Rory collapsed on that floor. He didn't give them any shade. He never checked up on them. That's not reasonable. And finally, the defense has made a lot about the cocaine, saying that, again, it was all Rory's fault because of this cocaine. But Your Honor, it is not our burden to prove that the cocaine wasn't the fault. It is our burden to prove that Coach Taylor was at fault in this case, to prove that Coach Taylor was at least 51% responsible. And we have done that. In fact, the defense hasn't shown you that it wasn't anything other than Coach Taylor. Because they can't even tell you when this cocaine was ingested. 60 nanograms. The reports you have are going to tell you that that is a trace amount, a very small amount. This could have been ingested days before. We don't know. The defense cannot argue that the cocaine caused Rory's street symptoms that day. There is no evidence suggesting that. The only evidence that you have today is that Coach Taylor sent Rory to Burma Road, and while she was struggling, sent her to a new slide tackling drill. Had 15 players tackle her to the ground, unnecessarily, time and time again, even though she was struggling. The hot Texas heat, she was unrelentless and unforgiving. Your Honor, that is why we ask that you return the only verdict that the evidence in this case supports, that Coach Taylor is 100% responsible for the death of Rory Street. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Garcia. Ms. Dworkin. Court is in recess, so if my scoring judges will please submit their ballots, that would be great. We will all need to stay in this Zoom room until all of the ballots have been submitted and I get the okay to release y'all. I will go check and see in a couple of minutes how we're going on that, but well done to both advocates. I thought y'all did a great job and good luck with the rest of the competition.
Thank you so much, and thank you for judging.
Of course.
Thank you.